Good morning. My name is Brad Levy. I'm a partner and the co-location head of the Chicago Real Estate Group at DLA. Thank you again for everybody. This morning's been off to a great start, and we are looking forward to our next panel. So welcome to Innovation at the Cutting Edge in a New Real Estate Paradigm. I'll do some brief introductions, and then we'll get started. Starting farthest away, Tyler Henritze is Senior Managing Director at Blackstone, where he is the Head of Strategic Investments for Blackstone Real Estate Americas, and previously served as the Head of Acquisitions Americas. Over the course of his 18 years at Blackstone, Tyler's been involved in many notable transactions, among them the acquisitions of QTS Realty Trust, the Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas, and Simply Self Storage. Next to Tyler is Evan Reagan-Levine, Executive Vice President at JBG Smith. Evan is in the JBG Smith Investments Group, where he heads strategic initiatives for JBG Smith, including digital infrastructure, strategic partnerships, venture investments, and new business lines. Haley Gailib is Executive Managing Director for USAA Real Estate, where she leads USAA's multifamily, mixed-use, and senior housing businesses and oversees its ground-up development program for housing. Next to Haley is Andy Cohn of Gensler. Andy is the co-chief executive officer of Gensler, who along with co-CEO Diane Hoskins oversees both long-term strategy and day-to-day operations of Gensler's global architecture and design platform. Last, our moderator today is Mitchell Shear of Camber Creek. Mitchell is executive partner at Camber Creek, the longest-standing real estate technology-focused venture capital firm. Together with his partners, he works to identify early-stage, industry-leading portfolio companies to cultivate, invest in, and grow. With over 35 years of leadership, technology, innovation, placemaking, and development experience, Mitchell has led both private and public real estate companies where he developed and enhanced buildings and environments, envisioning and delivering vibrant neighborhoods across the Washington, D.C. region. From 2003 to 2017, Mitchell was president of Vornado Charles E. Smith, where he directed the strategy, performance, and growth of Vornado's extensive 20-plus million square foot Washington, D.C. portfolio. With that, I will turn it over to Mitchell. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Good morning, everyone. Certainly, as we're thinking about real estate and technology, we should figure out what the heck that vibration is.
It is. Activity.
It's kind of
that architecture,
yeah.
Right? Some
structural design.
Structural.
Yeah. So we're going to have some, you guys picked the right group to come to because we're going to have some fun. And our job is, if you guys are going to sit through this, is to send you home with some nuggets and not just to hear the same old, same old. So panelists, you know, let's give them something. So let's start, while we're focusing on the intersection of innovation and technology and the built, you know, with the built environment, let's talk about a headline from a week ago. Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky, who recently announced that employees could work from home forever, he called the office an anachronistic form from a pre-digital age. And he went on to say, the office as we know it is over. He went so far as to say he was comparing 2019 to 1950, and interestingly enough, as he announced that they would go fully remote, their career pages got more than 800,000 views. So for those of us in the room, those are kind of fighting words. So I'd like for the three folks who are heavy on assets and for Andy, who works with lots of people, to, you know, when you hear something like that, and Andy, we'll start with you. When you hear something like that, what does that say to you?
Well, first of all, that, you know, you're talking about a darling in the media industry, and think about the business that Airbnb is in. They're in the home rental business. So what he cares about is renting homes and not offices. So I think that's a tainted view. I come from the other side of this, where the office is about the heart of an organization. It's about mentoring and coaching people. From our research, and we have a big research institute, 47% down on collaboration during COVID, 47% non-collaboration going on. You can't collaborate on a 17-inch screen, which is, so important. So, and then the last piece I'll just add is that, millennials make up 54% of our workforce. By 2025, millennials will make up 70% of our workforce. They can't work at home with 3 roommates. They have to go, they want choice, they want variety, but they want an office to go to where they can have purpose in their lives.
Okay, so there's a bit of a counterpoint. Tyler, where do you come out on all this?
Well, I think from an investment perspective, there's definitely a lot of caution today in and around office, but I think there was caution even pre the pandemic. I mean, from an investment perspective, I think as an asset class, people looked at significant CapEx as a percentage of NOI as a drag on free cash flow, and I think in a lot of ways, office was growing out of favor before you get into structural questions about return to work and whatnot. I tend to agree that I think that the purpose and the utility of an office building needs to evolve, and it needs to facilitate that type of collaboration. If you're commuting an hour just to sit at a desk and work on a computer because you're doing a back office job function that you can do from home, there's not a lot of reason for that person to commute an hour both ways when they could be working during that time. So I think that the way office space is configured needs to be rethought to accommodate for the type of collaboration that was noted. But I still think we see this incredible bifurcation happening right now from an investment perspective between truly the best-in-class office buildings in great submarkets and everything else. And if you look at truly modern office space today, even on the other side of the pandemic, rents are at all-time highs. How best-in-class is defined today maybe has narrowed, but I think there are certainly companies that want to set a tone for their culture. They want to get people back together, and it's just not going to be enough to sort of offer up their employees a generic 1980s-style cube farm. The office building of the future needs to be more than that, and I think people that can create that and can build that, and a lot of that is newer product, I think are going to do just fine, and we would invest in those type of buildings.
Evan, you want to swing?
No, sure. I think a lot of what you just mentioned makes a lot of sense, and there's going to be a real challenge as we look at what happens to that universe of buildings and even that just reduction in demand that comes from that flight to quality, that comes from choosing certain locations. And I think we definitely believe that there's going to be not only a bifurcation from a product type perspective or product age perspective, but also from a quality and amenity perspective, like a lot of others have said, and it creates winners and losers in different markets. But I think when we look, writ large across the board, what happens when companies say, fine, I'm going to keep an office presence, but I'm going to shed 20% of my square footage, I'm going to shed 30% of my square footage. Watching what that utilization looks like is going to ultimately determine, I think, for us, how large is that demand pool and what does vacancy look like after these changes have worked their way through the system, and what does that do for a lot of office markets that historically have operated at very low levels of vacancy and today may not ever return to that level. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch as there's this split not only between the newest best buildings but the right submarkets, who are the winners and losers in a pool of demand that's getting smaller, while the pool of inventory, despite things like residential conversions, et cetera, is still pretty big probably for the go-forward need. I think that'll be a really interesting trend to watch. The thing I would add just on top of this, our firm is building out Amazon's second headquarters, and they recently we finished topping out their first 2 million feet. They've hired 5,000 people out of an estimated 25 to 38,000 in our market. And they've actually taken space and grown during the pandemic. And what we hear from them is that they're not sure what that space will look like from a configuration perspective, from a utilization perspective, but they know they're still going to need it. And those 5,000 jobs already that they've hired all have to be within driving distance of that office. So there's a role for it. We're just not sure what that demand pool is ultimately going to look like and what vacancy will result.
Haley?
I think office buildings today have to compete just like apartments have done for the longest time by offering, tenants and their workforce amenities and reasons to actually physically be in the office over and above all those sort of intangible benefits of building relationships, collaborating, growing the younger team through the ranks and increasing their experience and knowledge. So now office buildings, have the rooftop, and the newest breed of office buildings have the rooftop amenity decks, the sort of rec room, expansive break areas, and all types of, exercise machines, etc. So again, I think it's winners and losers here.
And
I get a kick out of some of these surveys that ask employees, like, do you want to come to the office? Like, it's a little bit like asking my 3.5-year-old, like, do you want ice cream for breakfast? I mean, it's like, yeah, like I would love
wait, let's put a pause there. So I said everyone had to go home with something. So asking their 3.5-year-old if they want ice cream for breakfast, that's perfect.
I do think like it's a little bit silly. I mean, we're in an incredibly tight labor environment. There's obviously a war for talent. I think that companies are willing to be highly accommodating today. I do think the truth will play out over time in terms of what is the better model for better outcomes for a business. And I'm hard pressed to see that that's entirely remote all the time. I just don't know how you train people, how you collaborate. Is there some balance? Do people need to be tethered to work, showing up exactly at 9 a.m. and leaving exactly at 5 p.m.? Like, that probably doesn't make a lot of sense either. It doesn't sort of accommodate for life and whatnot. But I just wanted to make the point that these surveys that talk about like asking employees, what they want and taking that as that's the Bible for what the future of office is going to be, I think is kind of silly.
I would also add, I mean, one thing that we've been saying is have the office as a destination, not an obligation. Yeah. That if it's truly an experience, that place you want to go, it makes all the difference in the world for employees to be there. As you said, there's a huge talent war going on. So as a destination, as a place to come together, as a place to collaborate, where you can get mentoring and coaching. How does mentoring and coaching happen on a 20-inch screen? It doesn't. How does culture, how does brand, how does the very future and vision of our organization come through? That's what I'm hearing from CEOs across the nation.
And I mean, some of our youngest employees, they're not working from at home in like a large living room or a second home or whatnot. They actually appreciate, I think, the camaraderie of being in an office with, great Wi-Fi, great tools, et cetera. Again, they don't necessarily want to be tethered there with sort of the rigid rules of yesterday, but it really varies kind of within an organization what individuals' desires are as well.
And Andy, you have a unique position where your clients are companies, from all industries and whatnot. So as you sort of aggregate this sentiment, and I know you guys think about it, we're sort of creeping along. And you see the percentages going up. Do we ever get to a tipping point? Do things change? What's your crystal ball telling you from this?
What we've been seeing out there, and we're working with thousands of clients right now, is absolutely there's a work from home contingent, and I get the question all the time, or more leasing or less leasing. So there's a certain percentage, and do you need more space or less space? And we've been seeing work from home, certainly there's going to be less space needed, 10, 15, 20%. For work from home, but balancing against that, and it's not talked about in the media, is that before COVID, there was densification going on. What used to be 200 square foot per person in an office went down to 75 square feet per person. Law firms that used to be 250 square feet per person went down to 100 square feet per person. So we're seeing this rebalancing going on. We're going in right now, and we're ripping out rows and rows of desks in these ubiquitous offices, and we're creating living rooms, a sense of choice for people where they can work in the office, much like in their home where they worked at their kitchen or their living room. Here are great living room settings. Think of a hotel lobby with great hospitality settings, with kitchens, with amenities. So people have, if they come to work, they have that sense of choice, that sense of variety during the day of working in different working environments.
And do you see where that square footage per person rebalances?
It's definitely rebalancing right now. We're seeing some companies actually taking slightly more space. But we are seeing a bifurcation between the size of tenants. The larger tenants, over 50,000 square feet, are balancing, and the square footage because of de-densification is going up. But the smaller companies that have 5, 10 people are saying, we can work from home. So it's more the larger tenants, medium to large size tenants, that are saying, you know what, Gensler, take a look at our space and re-densify our space so it feels appropriate. People don't want to sit on top of one another at a desk. They want, again, that sense of choice in the work environment.
And Haley, you spent a fair amount of time in the residential space. So are there trends for happening in residential related to work from home?
Yeah, so I'll mention actually two competing trends that I'm seeing in multifamily. The first one is in response to the lifestyle changes and work from home conditions. And it's basically expanding existing traditional business centers into full-blown co-working spaces with multiple meeting rooms, private offices that can be reserved, and so forth, which gave residents optionality and the ability to work outside their unit when they are working from home, but it also generated ancillary income, which is a win-win situation. On the other hand, with some of the the alternative trend is associated with a return to the office. And I'm sure many of you have read the reports that 1 in 5 U.S. households have adopted a pet early in the pandemic. Raise your hand if you're one of the 23 million households. And as residents started going back to work from work, a trend that we're starting to see is for larger multifamily communities to expand the usual dog spa, park, and now include dog sitting services, which have been very popular, especially with the pandemic, dog parents out there.
I think it's one thing I would just jump on all of this. It's so important to note, and it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that you're right. I think there are so many different things that are facing the office market. When you think about, fine, it's competing with now an apartment, co-working product at least maybe once or twice a week. Maybe we are seeing square footages change and we are seeing certain buildings win, but you take it net, I mean, I don't think there's an argument. I'd be interested if anyone feels differently to say that there's just going to be broad-based growth. I mean, where we're going to end up, I think, Andy, you're spot on. And when we thought about office back to 2015, 2016, we already saw 10 years of densification and even a reduction among 50% of companies by 20% in their space utilization drove office vacancies, downtown DC is a great example, from 9% to 18%. And I think you're seeing now already some move off of that level. And if that rebalancing results in some of those smaller companies leaving the market or even some of the bigger companies just staying the same or not growing at the same rate, you've created an environment where there's just, again, that reduced demand pool to a point where some of this space probably won't fill, or even a reduction of 10% in demand off of where we are creates a real hole that's going to be difficult to dig out of without broad-based growth of a lot more companies growing at a lower square footage per job ratio. So it's going to take a lot more job growth to move the market, I think, than it has historically, which should be a challenge for a lot of folks who don't own, the newest, best post-2015 product that, JLA talks about accounts for the only positive absorption in the country. I think there's a real challenge there.
Yeah, no one in the multifamily space has to sit around and debate, are people going to start living in their computers? Like, that's not a debate. Or in industrial, no one sits around and says, are people going to start shopping in malls again en masse and stop ordering online all of a sudden? Like, you just don't even have to think about these existential questions, so which I think almost by definition makes investing in office today trickier. You've got to be more selective, you've got to be more focused, you've got to be more thoughtful. It's certainly become a much smaller portion of our business. I think our overall exposure to traditional office today is less than 10% of our overall global business, and if you went back to the pre-GFC, it was probably as high as 40%. So it's definitely become just more challenging overall because you have to sit around and debate these existential questions, which, as you noted, were challenging even pre-COVID.
So Tyler, you guys are thinking about, a whole variety of different asset classes that are sort of overlapping. So talk a little bit, either generally or specifically, but as you think about flexible work companies, co-working, WeWork, where do you see their role? Where do you see the landlord's role? Where do you see this emerging in terms of how are the offices going to be served? How are the clients going to work in these buildings?
Well, first of all, there's still a lot of people that leave their house and go to work in some capacity. We've been big investors in the media and content creation space because it turns out it's hard to make an Amazon show in your living room. You actually have to go somewhere and film it, and so there's a lot of space that sort of surrounds sound stages that we've invested in. We've got a very big business around life science office. Again, Doing drug testing in your living room, not a great idea. So we have a big platform business there called Biomed. As it relates to sort of the flexible and co-working space, we spent a ton of time studying, everybody from Convene to Industrious to WeWork. The only actual investment we made was in a business in London called the Office Group, or TOG, which owns their real estate but manages it in a flexible, sort of divisible manner. I think that there's no question that I think the service that an Industrious or a WeWork or Convene provides to its end users has value. I think that people want to be more mobile, they want to be more flexible. I think we're believers in sort of the utility of that offering. I think what we struggled to be believers in was sort of the valuations and the business model of a lot of those. I mean, there's nothing new, in take parking. You want a parking spot on a monthly basis, or do you want to pay just for the Super Bowl? Turns out the price is different. You pay more for flexibility. If you give away that flexibility for free, or you give it away at a discount to what somebody will pay on a longer term basis, that's probably not sustainable in the long run. I think those business models are being reworked a little bit. I think they're going to be around. They're relevant. We're not an investor or don't have exposure to any of those outside of the one business in London called the Office Group. But I think they're relevant. I just don't think they're as I call it space innovation. It's not. People sort of started talking about these companies as if they were prop tech businesses or something. I mean, it's just utilizing space differently. I mean, industrial space is being utilized very differently than it was, 10 years ago. Used to be sort of like corporate garage space, and now it's high throughput, essentially retail space in some ways. So I think those business models, like I said, are what they're providing to the end user is relevant and will stay relevant. But I think you got to kind of look at the business models with more of a sober eye.
And Andy, how do you see the hospitality component of the sort of the new office being operated by the companies themselves through the flexible space providers, some combination?
Well, I think Tyler hit it on the head. There's when talking to the companies we're working with, there's a huge talent war going on out there. You hear it in the news every day, and how do you attract talent? And that's what I'm hearing from clients every day. And so we're seeing massive changes going on by providing variety, as I said, and choice at offices. So I'll give you an example of that. Whether it's in the office or part of the development. Here in Chicago, we finished a project called 167 North Green for the Shape Pack Group. And what they wanted to create was this incredible amenity package. This is a building built during COVID. And we put in the building, on the top floor of the building, an amazing amenity package that everyone's talking about here in Chicago, around the United States. Because what did they do? They provided this incredible hospitality space, incredible conferencing space, and they put a basketball court, a public gathering space, on the 17th floor. Chicago Bulls have practiced there, and this is now becoming one of the major gathering spaces in Chicago, and the building leased up faster than any other building in Chicago. At least that's my understanding. Another example in Chicago here is the post office, Chicago Post Office, 2 million square feet, built during COVID with an amazing amenity package at the base of the building, and the building now is almost fully leased. Now, how is it during COVID that these Class A products can come on the market and they gain all the major tenants that are going on in the marketplace? It's because there's this sense of choice, this sense of variety, this sense of third place. People are looking for third places, not home, not the office, but a place I can go to and get my work done, preferably close to your home or close to your office. But these are incredible examples of amenity packages that are blowing the socks off the market.
So Evan, this plays right into your sweet spot, because JBG Smith has long been known for placemaking. So pre-COVID, it was all about placemaking and bringing the mix of uses and creating a third place, et cetera, et cetera. So where do you think we are now, and where do you think we're going?
No, I think it's become increasingly relevant. You know, we sit up here and talk about the fact that there are going to be winners and losers. Well, the winners are going to be places that have great amenities, but also where those amenities exist at a neighborhood scale. And our investment thesis for a long time, as Mitchell pointed out, has really been around identifying demand driver, concentrating the investment, and owning a mix of the uses. So do we own the retail, the residential, the office? And actually, yes, there is still a place for office in environments like that that are where people want to go to convene, where they show up, where they do meetings, where they are excited about coming. And that amenity package really isn't just about the physical amenity in the building. It's about the 20 feet out, the 20 feet up, the street level. And I think we've been really successful over time at thinking through neighborhood level placemaking and leveraging scale and control to do things that oftentimes can be a loss leader on the individual deal perspective from a retail perspective that drive a lot of growth everywhere else in the portfolio. And I think the area where we've shifted our focus a little bit has been to say, look, we've been really good physical placemakers. Physical placemaking is important. It helps in the war on talent. How do we think about digital placemaking? And one of the, I think, most interesting things we're doing right now is actually as we looked at that investable universe, and as Tyler pointed out, that's shrinking. There's not as much out there that's really, when you think about, okay, maybe not malls, maybe not office, where is that capital going? It's compressing into a lot of different areas, whether it's data centers or apartments or lots of other uses. We identified one early on that, again, allows us to think about digital placemaking, and that's actually owning digital infrastructure. And I'll tell you that as we went out pre-COVID, before all of us were living at least a portion of our lives on Zoom, and we talked to technology executives, we heard that second only to talent, they were very focused on connectivity. And so we looked at our national landing project. We've got Amazon, the Pentagon, Virginia Tech as anchors. We said, how do we use our real estate holdings and our scale and control there to deliver digital infrastructure that can drive connectivity and making it the best connectivity on the planet? As it turns out, that's not table stakes. And real estate owners, especially owners at scale, have an opportunity to think not just about how you make the physical place, but how you do things like enable those broadcast studios, Tyler, that you talked about, things like massive redundant fiber loops and gridded fiber networks, edge data centers that bring compute closer to where the data lives, public and private 5G networks that support massive device density, different digital experiences that sit on top of this. That's an area where I think you're going to see more and more real estate companies really be thoughtful about how do you make, if it's going to be a smaller pool of sort of target buildings for tenants and a smaller universe of places to put your capital to work, how do you think about putting that capital to work in terms of owning digital real estate effectively, things like spectrum, fiber, data centers within neighborhoods that can enhance the neighborhood and provide an accretive return on their own?
So, Evan, why don't you take another minute or two and talk about the digital infrastructure with some specificity, so people really understand. You're doing something that is a little outside of the current norm. So why don't you explain what you've been up to?
Sure thing, Mitchell. So just to give a little bit of background here, we're doing this as a pilot in a project called National Landing. National Landing is home to Amazon's second headquarters. It's adjacent to the Pentagon, a $1 billion Virginia Tech Innovation Campus. So it basically is all the makings of an innovation district. Office market's about 12 million feet. We own about half of that. So that's basically, we have a neighborhood the size and scale of the Austin CBD or Cambridge with these incredible anchors. And we said, because we have so much ownership and control in this neighborhood, about 80% of the developable land, as I noted, a little over half the office market, about 30% of the multifamily, we said, let's look at what digital infrastructure we can deliver. So we're actually building out and purchased some of a gridded fiber loop. So all that fiber goes through the streets, to the buildings, to every piece of street furniture out there, and it terminates in 2 edge data centers. So don't think of big hyperscale 100,000 foot data centers. Think of 5, 10,000 foot smaller facilities where you have network breakout, where you bring all the different carriers to come into that place and then distribute them. So every building has every fiber provider possible. It's got redundant, reliable, secure connectivity, and you can put things in those facilities like supercomputers, like things that tenants need. Again, how do you make that office really an interesting and desirable place where you have to be there to get the lowest latency, the most reliability? And then we're also, one of the things that's most interesting, everyone reads about or thinks about 5G. Everyone can look on their phone, probably even here in the bowels of the ballroom here, and see, okay, I've got 5G connectivity. Well, actually what you have is sort of 4G plus. It's not that next level of connectivity. It's really what's possible today based on using macro sites. And true 5G, you hear about in Super Bowl commercials, you get excited about the speed, the latency, all the promise of what you can do with that network. Well, guess what? That relies on having a lot of antennas close together that all have fiber and all have power. And so to do that, you need to own a lot of real estate in a contiguous way to actually roll it out quickly. And it's funny, when General Hooper was talking last night about China putting spools of fiber in the ground, China has state-owned companies effectively that deploy 5G at scale, that deploy digital infrastructure at scale. It takes longer in the US because you have to corral basically everyone in this room to go put together a deployment. And so we said across this whole neighborhood, we can get scale, we can deliver this faster. And then finally, the last layer of the stack that we think about is we actually invested in CBRS Spectrum. So we're one of the few real estate companies that we invested a relatively small in the scale of the project, but about $25 million in controlling a share of the actual 5G airwaves. And so we do use this network, this converged offering, because in a couple ways. One, we say, look, this is an opportunity for high-tech companies who are growth companies to really concentrate and increase their location quotient in this environment because they're users of this infrastructure. We also have attracted groups who want to build this out, use it as a living lab, be in front of Amazon, be in front of the Pentagon, be in front of federal regulators. And we also look at it as a standalone investment. I mean, we expect to invest about $60 million in this project, in that digital infrastructure, and it produces, call it a 10 to 15% stabilized yield on cost. And so for us, this is another place to put capital that's going to benefit the rest of the project, but that differentiates it. And I think being a real estate owner, this is all just other kinds of real estate. And we monetize it in a variety of ways, but ultimately the biggest way we monetize it is by creating a differentiated place for companies to come and innovate.
So are you saying the return is specifically on, what you're able to charge for the
Correct.
But at the same time,
there's a return beyond
the
that.
The lift is what either the velocity of the
Yes.
leasing or the stickiness of the leasing or the rents that you're able to.
Well, that's the bigger lift. I mean, you talk about biotech research, and groups who are doing drug development. Well, they're in specialized space in certain locations with the right demand drivers. We said if you're building for Industry 4.0, so things like cyber, cloud, IoT, AI, effectively you need something. You need the talent and you need infrastructure like this to make it really work, to test it, to show it off, to sell it. And so what we're trying to do is get that bigger uplift, but on its own, forget that uplift for a second, just on the structures that we have in place for actually monetizing directly the real estate. That's where that yield comes from. So it's interesting for us as we look at it, it's a whole new place to put, again, today, smaller amounts of capital, but it could scale across the country. This is going to be a new frontier for a number of real estate owners who are looking to say, hey, I've got scale, I've got control in the places that are going to grow. I want to go be able to attract tenants to those places, make them the winners, but also earn a return on doing that and have effectively what is a real estate business, just a real estate that, it's no different than a larger data center business, but it's real estate that it's digitally enabled and drives a return based on how you work with a new set of tenants, companies like AT&T or Verizon or Cisco or Amazon or whoever it is.
So, Tyler, Blackstone invests, in multiple asset classes. So, which asset classes have most been impacted by technology, positively or negatively, and how values have been impacted? How do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I were to describe very simply how we think about investing and allocating capital, it really is all about big demographic and big technology shifts and trying to deploy a lot of capital in front of those long-term, long-duration tailwinds that are where you're on the right side of technology or the right side of demographics and getting out of the way and not trying to outsmart the wrong one. So, we've massively de-emphasized our traditional office business. We've been out of the traditional mall business for 12 plus years. We've significantly decreased our overall retail exposure just across the board, although we still have a modest exposure to the grocery anchored space. I think we've de-emphasized some of the gateway cities at the expense of some of the Sun Belt markets in a lot of ways, just given the big demographic shifts to the Sun Belt. But areas where I think we still feel like technology has huge tailwinds. We've been the biggest investor of industrial real estate on planet Earth. We had a board meeting this morning, and despite obvious volatility in the markets right now, we're seeing releasing spreads of 30-40% year over year, releasing spreads of 30-40% as leases roll, which is just astounding and growing, especially for certain infill pockets where a lot of these companies need to find labor, they need to be able to deliver. And that's a combination of technology, but also a shift away from these supply chains that were stretched so thin that we're operating on kind of a just-in-time model, and now they're operating on a just-in-case model, so they're building redundancies there. You speak about digital infrastructure. We made a very large investment last year. We took private a company called QTS, which owns and develops data centers. We develop for 3 different constituents: government, hyperscalers, which think basically Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, et cetera, and then enterprise users in a commingled environment. That business, just unbelievable tailwinds. I sort of think about the storage and the computational needs around data. It's like the mega trend of all mega trends right now. It encompasses everything. Still like logistics, like the data center space. We like almost anything housing related. For 10 plus years, we just haven't created enough housing in this country. That would be less technology, more demographics, but it's related to technology because, as I said before, it's very, technology turns out does not really disrupt where you want to live. Despite all the technology in the world, people still want their space, and they actually want more space today than ever because for a lot of people, your home is your office and your gym, and for a year or so, it was your kid's school as well. So just about everything we like or don't like, I could sort of frame it through that paradigm of what's either on the right side of technology or demographics. And as our business has gotten bigger and our scale's gotten bigger, we've gotten out of the business to some extent of trying to be, hyper clever and say, how do we take a mall and repurpose it? There's probably a business there for somebody, but at the scale we're operating, that's not where we're focused.
Got it. And Haley, you've been thinking about product innovation at USAA in terms of senior housing, multifamily. So where's the innovation going on there?
Yeah, so we've been integrating technology into our portfolio for a very long time. Specifically with respect to multifamily, we've integrated smart home technology, the thermostats, the control access, leak detection, smart package lockers that through an app give residents access to their packages 24/7. We've also been an early adopter of revenue management, optimizing unit rents using the airline algorithms for pricing. Our, again, websites for all the assets allow all kinds of functions to be handled, from leasing, renewals, payments, and so forth. And that helped us a lot during lockdowns in terms of quickly switching to virtual leasing where needed. On the senior housing side, we've essentially integrated technology into our projects to basically resist disease with all types of touchless technology within time and budget constraints, and looking at geofencing and wearables with some of our senior housing operators as a way to handle contact tracing and so forth in case of an outbreak. But taking a sort of a step back, for us going forward, I think the focus from an investment standpoint is centered around a couple of pillars, housing being a big one, driven by the demographics, which is, I think a common theme that we heard earlier today. But then also a big area of focus for us has been where technology and real estate intersect, and that's life science, data centers, industrial, where, again, that push the envelope in terms of integrating robotics into buildings. And then, all just based on where we are in the cycle today, all the debt product that our team invests through. But as I, hear about kind of 5G, I'm constantly thinking of how that could have a profound impact on the construction industry. Because as you're looking at Internet of Things and linking devices together, that would be tremendous for linking autonomous construction equipment and sort of surveillance and all that. And, just kind of the magnitude of the impact on an industry that's been very inefficient for a long time is huge.
And Andy, if we go back to the what Evan was talking about the digital infrastructure or other infrastructure. How is that impacting users, decision makers, impacting their decision-making process?
Well, I think it was said before, I think, with all our clients, whether it's developers or users, there's an unbelievable flight to quality right now. That A buildings in every type of asset class are the ones that our clients are looking at. B is struggling, and suburban C is really an issue. Also, we are focusing on right now is healthy, sustainable buildings. And that means we're designing the new buildings that we're coming out with right now, have lots of indoor-outdoor spaces, lots of HEPA filters, lots of the ability to open up sliding glass doors and have inside-outside spaces. And sustainability, and we haven't talked about that much up here, but sustainability, look, COVID's been a wake-up call for climate change. And as we sit up here right now, I could tell you that in the next 3 to 5 years, most buildings that we're working on will be net zero, meaning they're not taking any energy from the grid. It's not just that we're going to be wishing to do this, it's going to be mandated by code, by all our local governments. And so we're working on the next building, the next iteration of buildings of the future are going to be completely sustainable with lots of sensors and lots of measurements for measuring the sustainability of those buildings. And that's going to be a major change in our industry. And lots and lots of new products coming out, both passive and active. I sit on a board of a company right now that's developing liquid photovoltaics, where on the outside of our buildings we can put photovoltaics, you won't even know it. There's an amazing amount of innovation occurring right now on the next generation of buildings to be net zero.
Any other comments on what Andy just raised?
I think it'll just be another headwind for, as you said, older B and C office buildings. I mean, I think one of the most interesting questions over the next 10 or 15 years is what happens to those buildings, physically speaking, because it's very expensive to modernize those old buildings, even before you get to what might be new mandated, green requirements.
How do you guys reconcile the shortage of housing and now the sort of the increase in the new asset class of single-family rental and purpose-built rental housing, which from our standpoint at Camber Creek, we see it as a very investable asset class because now all of a sudden it's really a tech-enabled asset class, and it's a new asset class. So you're not using all the spaghetti of the old back-end systems. You're able to sort of get a group of diffused homes in all kinds of locations, bring them together, manage them. So any thoughts or comments on single family, and then how do we get enough housing product into the market to meet the demand?
Well, I would just say, I think, as the sector has become institutionalized, it speaks to the fact that there's a lot of consumers that want to live in a traditional single-family home. They want to be in a neighborhood, maybe they want to be in a school district, they want to be on a cul-de-sac, they don't want to be in for some people with families, a commingled, apartment complex. And I think the fact that that opportunity now exists for people, and they can do that in a rental format with institutional owners with the same type of service standards you would expect at a multifamily project is a good thing. What gets me excited is a little bit what you alluded to, which is that now that we're into sort of purpose-built single family, where people are building communities on a horizontal basis, all on the same CapEx cycle, presumably all on the same backbone from a management perspective, not distributed all over the place, which was kind of, think of like Invitations Homes 1.0, which is what we did coming out of the crisis, much more difficult to manage. If you can do that and get everything on the same systems from a technology perspective, imagine, it would be nirvana as a renter to be able to live in a single family home, but everything from paying your rent to all of your services in your home, all coordinated and handled through a single app. That would be amazing. And I think you're going to see, someone's going to figure out how to do this and then license that software to people that, to owners of homes that want to rent their homes out, but that are not owned by one of the big SFR owners, because I think that, anybody that owns a home knows it is just a pain in the butt to manage all of the things that you need to within a home. And if you can leverage technology in a seamless manner so that, you're not paying 6 different bills with 6 different vendors, in a disparate manner, but you can literally sit there and you can see, okay, here's my you know, got my YouTube TV account, I've got my, you know, heating and air conditioning, I've got my this, my that, all in one place, you know, including rent. That would really make, you know, home ownership, or even, not even home ownership, you know, home renting so much easier and manageable. And I think that's where the industry's heading, which I think is interesting.
No, I think I'd echo a lot of that, and I'd say that I think that's true across not only obviously the single family or build to rent rental space, but also just across multifamily in general. And all of this demands buildings that are digitally enabled. It demands massive device density to actually make this stuff work. So it's all the stuff that plays into the notion of 5G becoming more important, but it also is going to drive compute loads, which eventually are going to have to get back to data centers, whether it's hyperscale or whether it's the data center around the corner. I would say in this space, I think one of the most interesting innovations that we're seeing is, you know, you talk about demographics, Tyler. I think that's such a great point here, that this is driven by demographic. It's driven by preference of, you know, millennials who we've benefited. We build urban product for them. We shrank unit sizes to drop rent checks. We've seen them be renters longer than ever, given student debt loads, even with the high incomes. Like, there's a lot of different preference and demographic data. As that generation ages, they probably aren't going to just exclusively go out to big single-family rental homes, you know, somewhere in the Sun Belt. There's going to be a need for product to evolve, and I've seen that happening already when you see some of the purpose-built build-to-rent that's actually shrinking the size of the footprint. But I think there's probably also going to emerge a hybrid, and we're starting to see this happen right now, where it's something between a townhome and single-family rental, or even between multifamily and townhome, where you have new product types. You know, something we're exploring is higher density build-to-rent townhomes that effectively double the density of traditional townhome rental, and that approach from a, just given when you look at construction cost and the density involved, they can approach the land value of stick multi, but address a demographic who's rapidly growing and seeking sort of urban, walkable, place-made environments, hopefully with something where they can walk to their office, but also a little bit more space in that build-to-rent product. And I think this will be an interesting one, because we've got perspectives here on stage saying, well, this is a tech business. You know, Mitchell, you're looking at this saying, well, this is technology enabled. It's something that's venture investable in a way that maybe real estate wasn't in the past because of this new management component. But I also think, Andy, to your point, this is going to be a design question, whether it becomes these denser townhomes, whether it becomes a modified version of, you know, the build to rent to get the scale. Either way, I think this is going to challenge our industry to think differently in terms of physical form and also then enabling technologies, which is going to have ripple impact through traditional multifamily and through the other sectors, where this could become a really interesting and viable use case even in urban areas.
So good segue. Again, Evan, so you talk about investment decisions, decision making. So I'd love to hear from you guys about how you're using some of the property technology tools to make decisions, whether it's on an investment side, whether it's on design side, but please, anyone want to jump in? Haley?
Yeah, so, you know, for USA Real Estate, AI has a seat on our investment committee. It doesn't have a veto. We have built a spatial platform across all 85 major markets in the US. And this platform essentially integrates government, economic, demographic data, real estate information, satellite technology, machine learning, and essentially through a web-based interface, our team can, you know, access these trends generated by the platform on a metro, submarket, and neighborhood levels. For example, during the pandemic, we were able to determine the migration patterns for people by using real-time U.S. Postal Service database and rent growth and so forth. On the housing side, for example, we generated sort of predictive analytic tools that can forecast rent growth, and we use it to inform the focus of our investment activity, inform underwriting assumptions, sell-hold decisions. So it's one of a tool that the team utilizes.
I would totally echo what Haley said. And I think what's interesting is, you know, we talk a lot, and finding the next best, you know, way to lock a door or pay a bill is not going to change our investment strategy. And I think so much of PropTech has been around focusing and addressing these kind of physical pain points or process pain points around whether it's, you know, single family purchasing or whether it's living in an apartment or an office building. But I think the data question, you know, everything Haley you just talked about, that's it's near and dear to my heart. It's how I came into this industry and spent a lot of time thinking about this. But I think that over time, we have a lot of different companies, many in this room, us, you, who have proprietary platforms to look at that kind of information. I think, and I was just talking about this with some of our prop tech companies and venture investment firms, is that there's going to be an opportunity here for more and more scalable real estate data to drive decision making. And I think one of the most interesting and probably least investable today, but maybe most investable in the future areas for venture to really focus is on actually investing in the data platforms that make it easier for us to make the decisions about where we invest and in what product type we invest. And one area, one thing that we're focused on is, we have all this data that you mentioned. You can pull in a lot of different sources to say, I like this market, I like a little bit, this market a little more than that one, or I think this is going to be the rent growth level, or this is the migration trend. But going a level deeper and thinking about also, and I'm sure you guys are baking this in, but how do you bring opinion research, primary source data, political data? You had David Axelrod sit up here today and talk about all the different things you do from a campaign perspective. Well, political campaigns have massive amounts of data that drive opinion research. And as you think about opinion research, how do you apply that same preference information to being predictive about real estate investments, everything from finishes to unit mixes? And we're starting to experiment with that more, and there are companies out there doing that, because I think that increasingly we're going to have to rely as an industry on better and more granular data to make decisions. It's not going to be made based on someone's gut or their instinct or their experience alone. It's going to be made on this really complicated sort of set of input parameters and variables that we can study and track and analyze. And that's something that today, outside of proprietary platforms, doesn't really exist in a fulsome way, like as a product that anyone can actually go buy off the shelf.
On the next generation of buildings that we're designing, what we've been discussing is touchless and frictionless. And that means everything being automatic to coming in the front door, and you have biometric ways of scanning your face or scanning your retina and being able to know who you are, being able to use mobile devices, your own mobile device, to transmit through a building. So you check in, you have it on your mobile device, it knows who you are, it presses the elevator button to know which floor you're going to, it knows which conference room you're going to, it tracks your utilization in the space itself. This is the next generation of buildings using technology as a way of tracking you, knowing your preferences of air conditioning in a space, lighting in a space, especially for hotels as an example, or office buildings. So we're seeing this idea of touchless and frictionless as the next generation of buildings that are going to come on the marketplace, probably in 2 years or so.
Yeah, I think that going back 20 years ago, what really mattered was sort of the four walls, like just the physical. And I think the physical is still as relevant today as it's ever been. But in addition to that, as owners and investors, you have to think about sort of that digital layer that sits between your assets and your customers, or maybe sits between your business and your investors. And not to give props to one of your competitors, but Fifth Wall, I think, has a great name. The fifth wall. Like in a lot of ways, I think that's what technology and prop tech sort of is today. For our business, we decided about 4 or 5 years ago that it was going to be very hard for us to sustain what we thought was our leading position as a real estate investment manager without having a front row seat and investing actually in a lot of these emerging companies. And we didn't think it was enough just to meet with them and hear what they were doing. We wanted to actually say to them, if you want exposure to our broad real estate portfolio, and have Blackstone help validate you as a business, we'll invest. And we've done that in about 10 or a dozen or so examples. And we've learned a lot. The dollars we've invested have not been massive in the scale of what we're doing in traditional real estate, but I think it's allowed us to stay close to what's happening and what's emerging. It's allowed us to avoid some things that would have just been a waste of time. But we were an early investor in VTS. We're a big investor in DealPath, which is a tool that helps us from an investment perspective kind of collate all the data that we get across our investments. And as a business, we've been spending a lot of time trying to think about how do we pull all of the data that comes off of our existing owned real estate portfolio, synthesize that, and then quickly distribute it back to our investment team so people can see trends in real time. And it's not really rocket science, but it is just trying to see those inflection points in a given market or an asset, within an asset class as quickly as possible, or investing in tools that, again, help facilitate the type of things we've been talking about here, making for a more, I like that, frictionless, touchless experience with your customers. I think the bar for real estate owners and investors is being raised now because, with customers being used to iPhones and Uber, that's what they want their real estate experience to be like. And if you think about, like, if you're a user, a tenant, and you want to lease 5,000 square feet, why does it have to be so painful? Why do we have to do 8 rounds of lease negotiations on a bespoke lease that's 120 pages long, and we need 10 attorneys to do it? And then why is building out that space so complex, and why is furnishing that so, like, I do think that's where, going back to your conversation around a WeWork or an industrial, they solve some of that. That customer experience becomes so much more seamless. But I think whether you're an industrial user, a multifamily tenant, a hotel user, we say a lot in the hospitality space, that the hospitality experience used to begin and end when you checked in and checked out, and today it really begins right when you start thinking about where you want to travel, and it ends when you write a review online. That elongation of the hospitality experience, I think that's applicable to all forms of real estate, and it just means that everyone in this room has to up their game to accommodate for those new challenges.
So I have plenty more questions, but I want to turn it to the audience for questions. Anyone have a question that's...
Bishop?
Yes, sir.
One of the things that struck me, especially by our Gensler friend here, is that I had always thought that the best and most environmentally conscientious approach was preserving old buildings. That, architects and lawyers and developers say that's the best thing to do rather than build new, use what's existing, right? It seems to me that with the advance of technology and some of the ways that the bar has been raised, that the prospects for preserving some of these Class B and Class C buildings, the likes of which are located on LaSalle Street in Chicago, for example, are dimming as a result of the prospects that building new might be building better and building cheaper. Is there any truth to that, or am I...
Well, definitely the most sustainable approach is obviously to keep what's existing and renovate it. It is, to get to net zero on some of these existing buildings, it is really, really hard. I know my clients right here are all working on retrofitting different buildings into different uses. Right now we're working on many, many office buildings that are being renovated into residential, as an example. But I think net zero has very specific properties you have to build in, and it's easier to build in to a new building than it is to an existing building. It gets really cost prohibitive. But I do think there's a huge business right now in renovating of existing buildings in the right location.
I think that can be kind of challenging too when you think about everything. How many things have to be right in terms of the quarter perimeter depths, the ceiling heights, and by the time you get through a lot of these issues, and those are just a couple, you end up in a lot of buildings where you say, well, it's not worth it. Even if all of those things are perfect and I've got the ideal candidate, I'm saving on structure and maybe parking. So economically, it's like they're pretty close to say that I'm going to end up with something that's flawed product. So I get a little anxious sometimes. And not picking on anything Andy said, but just with this idea that, okay, we have a bigger problem with some of these older buildings than just saying, hey, we're going to convert them all away, or say that, hey, you should suffer through 8-foot finished ceiling heights because it's greener to do that than to build the new building that's better, from a sustainability operation go forward perspective and has better quality of life. I don't think the conversions alone are going to save us.
I would just add to that a lot of our clients are looking for authenticity in design, so their existing buildings do bring that. Taking an older building and making it back to the way it was originally. But like Evan's saying, it's just really cost prohibitive. We're working on a lot of projects where the floor-to-floor heights are so low that it's prohibitive to make that change. That's a question.
My question's for Tyler. With the maturity and SFR of technology like SMS Assist, do you think you're going to continue to see great operating margin improvements as you continue on in SFR, or do you feel like we've plateaued a little bit?
So first of all, we have fully exited our Invitation Homes investment. The one area that we have an investment in today is a company called Home Properties of America. So I think relative to some of the big public operators, we are not, by any means, do we have the sort of scale in that sector that we do elsewhere? So I think, specifically around margins and the prospect for margin improvement there, I don't know if I'm in a great position to answer that in detail.
Maybe a bridge too far, but we're talking about innovation. Comment on real estate in the metaverse and the potential cross-section between some of the innovations you're talking about and the evolution of the metaverse.
I'll tell you that it's pretty hard to get to the metaverse. We're going to start with that, like as a baseline. We all talk about digital infrastructure, and it's funny, I actually do think we're hearing more and more about this. But when one of our consultants actually did a study for a big client of theirs, and they said, look, only about 20% of the United States population, like whether it's in office buildings or in their apartments or their houses, even has the bandwidth necessary today to actually experience virtual reality, augmented reality. And so I'm not going to comment on what real estate someone's going to be purchasing in there, but there's a gating issue today, and I think it's going to drive demand for a lot of what we talked about. That to actually do that, by the way, you need 5G or you need massive high-powered fiber connectivity to actually deliver that experience with the latency that doesn't make you want to vomit because of skipped frames and other things like that. And if it's only 20% today, you're going to see, I think, a lot more demand for more data centers, more fiber assets, greater deployments of 5G, the tower companies, et cetera. I think you're going to see more of that personally in order to enable being on and in the metaverse to the extent it exists before you're going to see at least the likes of our company starting to make real estate investments there. But I don't think I'd mind making the enabling investments to get us there.
We're having some fun right now. We are working on several hotels that are in the metaverse. And what's great for a creative guy like me and a firm like ours is nothing has to line up. It can all be whatever it wants, create whatever you want. So it's like an architect's dream.
There's no gravity.
There's no gravity. So it's
it'll also make you throw up.
So it's fun right now. But it's interesting. We're getting approached a lot right now by different tech clients to design spaces in the metaverse.
I think there's not even consensus as to what the metaverse is by experts.
Yeah.
I could make an argument that URLs today is the metaverse. You're going to a digital place. Maybe that's two-dimensional, and we're now building out three-dimensional metaverses. People buy and sell URLs because certain digital universes are more valuable than others. We don't know which three-dimensional metaverses are going to gain popularity and which are not. Certain gaming environments are considered the metaverse, and there's a bunch of different gaming environments. I am certainly not going to stand up here and say I'm an expert on the metaverse, but when I read people that are technology experts and they themselves say there's not even a consensus as to where the metaverse is going to be or what it's going to be. At the moment, I think we've got enough challenges just trying to figure out the real world. So we're going to stay focused there for the time being.
So just to give a slight counterpoint to that, and I won't go too far because I am a longtime brick and mortar guy, but we are starting to see companies, we are starting to see how the metaverse can work as a tool to be incorporated, call it Internet 2.0 or something like that, and where you can see the beginnings of just deeper digital engagement where it can help, particularly in real estate, marketing and sales and at the front end of the business. But let's save that till the next summit. Other questions? I don't know if I can see anybody's hand. All right, let me ask the group the last question. So, as we come out of the pandemic, there's been some learnings and some takeaways. Some that will stay. And so, which ones do you think will stay? Which ones, and maybe why? And then maybe comment on which ones you might hope will stay. So, just a few quick little sound bites. Maybe just go right down the row. You want to start, Haley?
Yeah, I think the one that I think will stay is sort of the greater adoption we saw of collaborative environments and software, the shared files, and there's no going back. Once you've experienced that and kind of worked with a team through a spreadsheet or a document, it's just, there's nothing like it.
I would say I wouldn't bet against the basic human desire to congregate and gather and be together in person. I think it was really painful for a couple of years to not be able to do that. But you look at sporting events, concerts, even business travel, how quickly it's come back statistically just since the beginning of the year. Obviously, people want to feel safe, but the notion that human beings don't want to be together, I would not put a lot of dollars behind that. I think people want to congregate, they want to be together. As a business, we've been back together in person, I think, more often and more frequently than a lot of our competitors. I think it's made us better and stronger. I think that despite, what other companies may say or do, and I certainly think our model will be more of a, it'll be more of a Swiss cheese element, sort of a hybrid, but I would not bet against sort of the basic need and the basic desire for humans to be together in person for fun, for everything.
I couldn't agree more with that. I'd also, honestly, sort of a related point is look at how the pandemic was an accelerant in so many ways for our industry, for our culture. But I think when you think about how our industry has just shifted over the past decade, I mean, looking out at the fact that you used to consider, the sort of investable universe, and for many of us was gateway markets, was 2 product types, was pretty limiting in a lot of ways. And you've seen expansion of so many different places throughout the Sun Belt that have been able to migrate, draw talent in. You've seen investments in new sectors or expanded investments in things like hyperscale data centers, things like, again, even buying spectrum like we did. I think you've expanded, and it's forced us to look as an industry at how can we grow and get out of the same geographies, the same product types, look at how product types even evolve. And as office changes and becomes maybe concentrated in the best buildings, in the best places, it's not going away, but it's forced us to look. And even WeWork, thinking about, Tyler, your comment about how much easier it was to do a small transaction if you show up at a WeWork and basically put your credit card down versus going through $100,000 of legal review for a 5-person company. There are so many changes that I think the pandemic has accelerated, making our industry look at itself and change in a way that's, I think, really exciting and opens up a lot of potential for everyone here and challenges the status quo of the same 5 markets and 2 product types that we started with.
I couldn't agree more what was just said. It's all about designing for real, visceral experiences. I've gotten more out of this live with you. I'm looking at all your body language right now. I haven't been able to see people's hands, their legs, their arms. I'm able to read body language in this audience. And that's what the human experience is all about, design for the human experience. I think health and wellness is here to stay. And the third piece, which I mentioned before, which is trillions and trillions of dollars going to be spent on, is climate change.
I think it's also awesome that we got through a whole real estate panel with no questions on interest rates, despite the fact that interest rates have gone up faster and quicker than ever before. So thank you to the moderator.
No. We are focused on a different topic. They can go to the room next door.
I love it.
I would just say in conclusion that I couldn't agree more about the human interaction and whatnot. But I do think that we have, as Evan's saying, we have accelerated certain things through this process, and the sort of the digital seamless experience that's emerging, whether it's for an office experience, whether it's for multifamily experience, whether it emerges in single family, I think certainly the pandemic has accelerated that. And just a really nifty little example is, it's a human interaction that doesn't necessarily need to take place. We invested in a company called Notarize, which is an e-notary platform. And sort of pre-COVID, it was putzing around. And you need to get state-by-state approval. But now all states have approved, and let a notarization become just something that's a box checker as opposed to a difficult sort of pain point, if you will. So I think there have been some real positive things that have happened as well. And I think we're out of time. Anybody else? Great, thanks.